Welcome to the deep dive. Today we're going to maybe challenge one of our most fundamental assumptions about health and even about cutting-edge medical tech.
Oh, how so?
Well, what if true health isn't about perfect, unwavering order?
Okay.
What if it actually relies on a precise balance that includes, well, chaos?
Chaos.
Right.
That definitely sounds counterintuitive.
It does, doesn't it?
Absolutely. I think when most people hear chaos, they think randomness, dysfunction, maybe something breaking down.
Exactly.
But in the world we're talking about today, the world of biology and these dynamic systems, chaos actually takes on this surprisingly rich and often really beneficial meaning.
That's such a crucial distinction to make right up front, and that really is our mission in this deep dive. We want to unpack the surprising, often essential role of what scientists call nonlinear dynamics and this idea of chaos.
Yeah, in our most fundamental biological rhythms.
Everything from your heartbeat, literally, to your brain activity. And then we'll get into how these complex principles are inspiring powerful new algorithms, tools for medical diagnosis, for prediction.
So the idea is, by the end of this, you'll have a kind of shortcut to understanding why chaos, in this biological sense, is often a very, very good thing for you, for health.
Might have said it better.
Yeah.
And to guide us through this pretty intricate landscape, we've gathered some fascinating sources.
Yeah, we're drawing quite a bit from a foundational review article. It's all about chaos and order, specifically in biomedical rhythms.
And then we'll layer on top of that insights from two systematic reviews.
Right. One digs into the evidence for chaos and EEG signals, brainwaves related to human performance. And the other explores these advanced optimization algorithms, techniques that are genuinely changing the game in medical diagnostics, using chaos-inspired ideas.
Okay, so let's start at square one. When we talk about chaos, biologically speaking, what are we actually getting at?
Well, nature fundamentally is just full of nonlinearities.
Nonlinearities, okay. Sounds a bit technical.
It does, but think of it like this. In a simple linear system, right? You push a swing twice as hard, it goes twice as high. Predictable.
Makes sense.
But in a nonlinear system, which is most of biology, a tiny nudge might send it soaring unexpectedly. Or a huge push might do almost nothing.
Okay. Unpredictable responses.
Exactly. It's this sort of unpredictable yet still rule-governed responsiveness that gives rise to the incredible variety we see in nature. And physiological rhythms like your breathing, your heartbeat, they're central to life.
And these rhythms can be.
They can be either periodic, nice and orderly, or maybe surprisingly irregular, chaotic even, over time and space.
That distinction feels really important. So extreme irregularity, sure, that can be a problem, but it's not always bad when things aren't perfectly predictable.
That's exactly right. Yeah. I mean, yes, abnormal rhythms can definitely arise from alterations in physiological control systems that leads to what some people call dynamical disease.
Dynamical diseases, okay.
But here's the kicker. Chaotic behavior isn't just random noise. It's actually seen as a typical response, often a healthy response of biological systems.
Really? A typical response?
Yeah, there's a great quote from the Nobel laureate Ilya Prigogine. He says something like, "Our physical world is a world of instabilities and fluctuations which are ultimately responsible for the amazing variety and richness of forms and structures we see in nature around us."
Wow, I love that. That totally reframes chaos. It's not something to just avoid. It's fundamental to life's richness. It's adaptability.
Precisely.
So what are the key characteristics then? What defines this essential biological chaos?
Well, the most famous one, the one you've probably heard of, is sensitive dependence on initial conditions.
The butterfly effect.
That's the one, the butterfly effect. It just means that tiny, tiny differences in the starting point of a system can lead to wildly different outcomes down the road over time.
Like the classic, a butterfly flaps its wings in China might cause a hurricane in Brazil. That came from meteorology, right? Lorenz.
Exactly, Lorenz's weather studies. But what's fascinating is the mathematician Henri Poincaré. He had an incredibly clear grasp of this way back in the late 19th century.
Really? Before Lorenz?
Yeah, studying complex celestial mechanics, he saw that even if you know the laws perfectly, tiny initial differences could still lead to vastly different, unpredictable outcomes.
So it's not just about weather or randomness.
No, it's fundamental. It shows how living systems can stay nimble. Those tiny shifts allow for a healthy range of responses, keeping the system adaptable, ready for anything.
Okay, so it follows rules, it's deterministic, but you still can't predict the long-term outcome perfectly. What else defines it?
Another key feature is the idea of fractals and strange attractors.
Fractals, like those cool patterns.
Yeah, exactly. Imagine a coastline. right? If you zoom in, it still looks just as jagged and complex. Little bays, little peninsulas, mirroring the bigger shapes.
Self-similarity?
That's it. That's a fractal, a pattern that repeats at different scales. And they have this weird property, a fractional or non-integer dimension. And we see them everywhere in nature. The patterns in a fern leaf, the way smoke curls. And in chaotic systems, these patterns trace out what we call strange attractors.
Strange attractors, what are those?
They're like, think of it as the system's preferred range of behavior. It's a conceptual map. The system always explores within this complex fractal shape, but it never repeats the exact same path twice.
Ensuring constant variation. Adaptability again.
Exactly. It's this beautiful, complex, self-similar geometry that's a hallmark of these dynamic, chaotic systems.
So how do scientists actually study this in us, in the human body?
Well, there are two main ways. One is mathematical modeling, building realistic simulations.
Okay.
The other, maybe more common in biomedicine, is time series analysis. That means analyzing actual data, signals recorded over time.
Like from an ECG or EEG?
Precisely. But the challenge is real biomedical signals, things like your white blood cell counts over time, your heart rate variability, blood pressure, even something like a Parkinsonian tremor. They are incredibly complex.
Yeah, they jump around a lot.
Right. The source material calls them inhomogeneous and non-stationary. They fluctuate in this irregular, complex way. And it's that very complexity that makes time series analysis so useful for finding these hidden chaotic dynamics.
It makes total sense. Okay, so let's dive into some actual examples. Where does this chaos show up in the body? Let's maybe start beyond the brain for now.
Okay, a prime example is the cardiovascular system. Heart rhythms are a powerful demonstration of these dynamics in action.
How so?
Take heart rate variability, or HRV. It's not just about how fast your heart beats, but how the timing between beats varies.
Right, I've heard of HRV.
And it's a critical predictor. Low HRV can indicate risk for arrhythmic events, even sudden death after a heart attack. But here's the twist. Normal, healthy heart function often involves these subtle, complex, even chaotic variations in rhythm.
See, that's the counterintuitive part again. We tend to think a steady, regular heartbeat is the picture of health.
I know, it feels wrong, doesn't it?
Yeah. So how do we reconcile that? This idea that some irregularity, some chaos is actually good for the heart?
It's a great question. Think of it this way. A healthy heart isn't a metronome ticking perfectly. It needs to constantly adapt to everything your body does. Standing up, breathing, stress, relaxation.
Okay.
And that adaptability expresses itself as variability. Sometimes complex variability that looks like chaos, it's a sign of responsiveness.
So rigidity is bad, flexibility, even if it looks chaotic, is good.
To a point, yes. And what's more, certain actual cardiac arrhythmias, things like premature beats, atrial fibrillation, even dangerous ventricular arrhythmias, some studies suggest these can be understood as instances of deterministic chaos.
Wait, so the problem itself might be a form of chaos?
Exactly, which is huge. Because if it's deterministic chaos, meaning it follows rules, however complex, it's not just random noise, then maybe, just maybe, it's controllable.
That opens up possibilities for treatment, right?
Big time. It has direct implications for therapeutic strategies.
So if these arrhythmias are a type of deterministic chaos, could we actually control them, like steer the chaos?
That's the fascinating thought. There's actually an approach for this, developed by physicists, called the Ott-Grabo-Georg approach, or OGY for short.
OGY, okay.
The idea is really clever. You used tiny, carefully timed nudges, little perturbations, to stabilize desirable but naturally unstable patterns of behavior that are already embedded within the chaotic system.
Okay, analogy time.
Think of trying to balance a pencil perfectly on its sharp tip. Seems impossible, right?
Yeah, completely unstable.
But if you could make tiny, precise, continuous adjustments at the base, you could theoretically keep it upright. The OGY method is kind of like that for chaotic systems. It makes desirable states accessible.
Wow, okay.
And the exciting part is applying this thinking to the heart. It could inspire completely new strategies. Maybe future pacemakers wouldn't just set a fixed rhythm.
What would they do?
They might use these tiny nudges to stabilize a healthy chaotic rhythm or gently guide the heart away from dangerous chaotic states like ventricular fibrillation. Imagine a pacemaker that learns and nudges your heart back towards healthy complexity.
That's incredible, using chaos theory to literally fix a chaotic heart problem. What about smaller scales? Inside our cells?
Oh, absolutely. We see these rhythms down at the cellular and molecular level too.
Like what?
Calcium oscillations inside cells. These fluctuations in calcium levels are fundamental. They control all sorts of complex cellular behaviors, and we see them in tons of different cell types.
And are they chaotic?
Well, often they're periodic, quite regular. But chaos and also something called bursting behavior have definitely been observed in calcium dynamics, too.
It's interesting. Anything else?
Another classic example is glycolysis. That's the main pathway cells use to get metabolic energy.
Right. Basic biology.
And the rhythms involved in glycolysis can also vary, sometimes orderly, sometimes chaotic. It shows these really complex oscillations and behaviors. It just seems to be a recurring theme, this dynamic dance between order and chaos across pretty much all scales of life.
It really is amazing, from cells to hearts. Okay,
Yeah.
let's scale up again. The big one, the brain.
Ah, yes, the brain.
If chaos is beneficial, the brain seems like the ultimate place for it. How does this nonlinear symphony play out in our minds?
Well, the brain is the ultimate dynamic nonlinear system, isn't it? I mean, 86 billion neurons, 150 trillion connections or synapses.
Mind-boggling numbers.
Totally. And its activity is definitely not simple random noise. EEG signals, the electrical activity we measure from the scalp, they really show this beautifully.
They always look so messy on the screen.
They do. They look erratic. But underneath that surface, they exhibit clear, nonlinear dynamic characteristics.
Yeah.
And EEG is great for studying this. It's non-invasive, relatively easy to use, and has fantastic temporal resolution. It can capture brain changes really fast.
Okay, so if the brain's chaotic-looking activity isn't a mistake, what are the actual benefits? Why is brain chaos good?
Well, the richness that comes with chaos seems to offer real advantages for what the brain needs to do. One paper puts it really well. It allows the system to quickly react to some new situation, changing conditions, and their response.
Adaptability again, flexibility.
Exactly. Think about it. A brain that was too rigid, too predictable. It would really struggle to learn, adapt, respond to novelty.
Yeah, you'd be stuck.
Right. There's this growing feeling, a consensus almost, that the future of understanding the brain, especially higher functions, will involve combining classical neuroscience with these newer ideas from nonlinear science. It really is like a dynamic symphony complex, flexible, sometimes orderly, sometimes chaotic.
Like a chaotic symphony. I like that. So what's the real-world evidence? Do EEG studies actually show this in action?
Oh yeah, so there's quite a lot now. Let's take cognition and intelligence. Some studies find correlations suggesting that higher intelligence might actually link up with a more complex, more sort of chaotic EEG structure.
Really? More chaos equals smarter.
In some studies, yeah. Participants whose brain signals showed more dynamic oscillating patterns tended to score higher on intelligence tests. It hints that maybe a more complex, adaptable brain is a more intelligent one.
That's fascinating. Again, so counterintuitive.
It really is. But then, look at the flip side. Cognitive load and fatigue.
What happens then?
We see the opposite trend, a decrease in chaos. So, for example, measures like sample entropy go down when people are doing really demanding mental tasks, like hard arithmetic.
So the brain becomes less complex when working hard.
It suggests the signals become more structured, maybe more focused, less exploratory. And when you get mentally fatigued, there's also a clear drop in the complexity of mental activity. The entropy goes down.
Like the brain is simplifying things to save energy.
That seems to be the interpretation. It really highlights that our cognitive resources are finite. Your brain kind of streamlines its operations when it's tired or under heavy load.
Okay, complexity is good for potential, for flexibility, but the brain pares it back when needed. What about people with highly specialized skills, like experts?
Ah, specialized brains. Yeah, studies on people like professional pilots or dancers have found distinct ordered trends or fingerprints in their brain dynamics using these nonlinear measures.
Fingerprints, like unique patterns.
Kind of. For instance, pilots might consistently show a higher value for something called the Holder exponent in certain frequency bands, maybe beta waves, while dancers show it in different bands, perhaps gamma.
Reflecting their specific skills.
Exactly. These unique patterns seem to reflect those highly learned skills and specialized tasks. It's like their brain's dynamic patterns have been honed, optimized for performance in their specific domain. Their chaos is refined.
Neural fingerprint of skill. That's wild. What about broader states, like being asleep or under anesthesia?
Yeah, anesthesia and sleep studies really reinforce this link between complexity and healthy function. As anesthesia gets deeper, the complexity of the EEG signal decreases significantly. The symphony sort of quiets down.
Okay.
And similarly, sleep deprivation also leads to decreased chaotic behavior in brain signals. It consistently points to this idea: when biological systems are functionally compromised, whether by drugs or lack of sleep, they tend to show less complexity.
So a certain level of chaos seems essential for optimal function. It's a marker of health.
That seems to be the message, yes.
Okay, so if chaos helps us learn, adapt, stay healthy, could we actually design systems that use this? I'm thinking maybe brain-computer interfaces, controlling things with thoughts.
Yes. This is a huge and really exciting area for applying chaos theory. Take motor imagery, or MI, and brain-computer interfaces, BCIs.
Motor imagery, just thinking about moving.
Exactly. Just imagining movements activates the motor parts of the brain, even in people who have neuromuscular damage and can't actually move. And chaos theory measures are proving really crucial here. Why? Because they can help distinguish the brain signals for imagined tasks from signals when you're not imagining anything.
Ah, detecting the intention.
Precisely. Detecting those unique chaotic signatures of intending to move. That's vital for BCIs that let people control wheelchairs, computers, prosthetic limbs just by thinking.
That could be absolutely life-changing technology. What about actual movement, like mastering a physical skill?
For motor movement and expertise, the findings are quite nuanced, actually. It's interesting.
How so?
Expert rifle shooters, for example. Studies found they demonstrate less reliance on complex brain activity during the act of shooting. Their correlation dimension, a measure of complexity, was lower.
Less complexity for experts.
Yeah, it suggests a highly refined, almost automatic execution. Their skill is so ingrained, the brain doesn't need that exploratory chaos anymore. It's efficient mastery.
Okay, what about learners?
Amateurs, on the other hand, showed greater complexity linked to better performance.
So more chaos helps when you're learning.
It seems so. Increasing complexity might actually help you acquire the skill, up to a point. It's like you need the chaotic exploration phase to learn, then you refine it into efficient, maybe less complex mastery, finding that balance.
Chaos for learning, streamlining for mastery. Fascinating.
What about when we're just doing nothing, resting?
The resting state. Even when you're not doing any specific task, your brain is incredibly active. It's never truly off.
The default mode network and all that.
Right. And studies using these nonlinear methods are challenging some older ideas about brain microstates during rest.
What did they think before?
Kind of a simple winner-takes-all idea, where one brain region or network would dominate for a short period, then another.
And the chaos view.
It suggests something much more dynamic. Brain regions seem to be constantly competing and cooperating, exhibiting high complexity and chaotic behavior even at rest. It's a continuous, complex dance. Wow, okay, this has all been about understanding how chaos works in us, in biology. But you mentioned earlier, can we actually use this understanding to build new solutions? Can we sort of design with chaos?
Yes, and this is where we make that leap from observing nature to engineering solutions. These insights into biological complexity are directly inspiring a new generation of powerful optimization algorithms.
Optimization algorithms, finding the best solution to a problem.
Exactly. Finding the best way to do something incredibly complex, like what's the optimal dose schedule for a cancer drug, or the best settings for a diagnostic machine. These algorithms help find those answers.
And how does chaos fit in?
Well, traditionally, many algorithms were deterministic. They followed a strict, predictable path to find an answer, but maybe not the best one, especially if the problem landscape was bumpy.
Getting stuck in a suboptimal valley.
Precisely. But now we have these things called meta-heuristic algorithms. Many of them draw inspiration directly from nature, like how ants find food or birds flock, or how moths fly towards a light. Swarm intelligence.
Okay, swarm intelligence. And you mentioned we need lots of different algorithms. Why not just find the one perfect one?
That's a great point. There's actually a famous theorem in computer science called the No Free Lunch Theorem.
No free lunch. Sounds ominous.
A little. But what it basically says is that no single optimization algorithm can be the best at solving all possible problems.
Yeah.
An algorithm that's great for one type of problem might be terrible for another.
So you need a diverse toolkit.
Exactly. And that theorem actually drives innovation. It encourages researchers to keep developing new algorithms tailored to different kinds of complex challenges.
Which leads us nicely to Moth flame optimization, or MFO. What's the story there?
MFO is a perfect example of that nature-inspired approach. It's a swarm intelligence algorithm, and it's inspired by how moths navigate at night.
How do they navigate?
They tend to fly by keeping a constant angle relative to a distant light source, like the moon. That helps them fly in a straight line over long distances. But if there's a closer artificial light, like a candle flame or a porch light, they maintain that same fixed angle, But because the light is close, it makes them spiral inwards, closer and closer.
Ah, the classic moth drawn to a flame.
Exactly, and MFO borrows that idea. The moths in the algorithm represent potential solutions, and the flame represents the optimal solution they're searching for. They spiral towards the current best flame found so far.
Clever. And now, here comes the chaos, right? They didn't just stop with regular MFO.
Precisely. This is where it gets really interesting for our theme today. Researchers thought, what if we inject some chaos into this process? They explicitly incorporated chaotic mechanisms into MFO.
Wow.
They developed what's called a chaotic moth flame optimization algorithm, or CMFO. It uses things like chaotic maps to initialize the positions of the moths and to update their movement patterns. It introduces that beneficial variability, that exploratory power, into the algorithm search.
To help it avoid getting stuck.
Exactly. And this isn't just theoretical. This CMFO algorithm, it's already been used to optimize the parameters for a type of machine learning model called a kernel extreme learning machine, or KELM.
Kelm. Okay.
And they used this CMFO-Kelm system for actual medical diagnoses, including identifying breast cancer and Parkinson's disease from data.
Wow. So that's a direct line. Biological chaos inspires algorithmic chaos, which helps diagnose diseases.
It's a fantastic example of that translation.
But the story doesn't end there, does it? There's an even newer version.
That's right. Innovation keeps going. The next generation is an algorithm called BWMFO.
BWMFO. Okay, what do the extra letters mean?
They stand for the enhancements. BWMFO takes the basic MFO idea and gives the moths some serious upgrades. It adds 3 key strategies: a Gaussian barebone mechanism, a wormhole strategy, and an elimination strategy.
Whoa, wormholes. Elimination. Sounds intense.
It is pretty clever.
Yeah.
Think of it like giving the Moth algorithm a super smart GPS. The Gaussian barebone part helps it converge faster and fine-tune its search near good solutions.
Okay, speeds things up. What about wormholes?
The wormhole strategy is cool. It allows the algorithm, or some of its moths, to essentially jump across the search space, like finding a shortcut. This really boosts its ability to explore globally and, crucially, helps it escape from those suboptimal valleys we talked about, local optima.
So it prevents getting stuck.
And elimination. The elimination strategy helps maintain diversity in the population of potential solutions. It periodically gets rid of the poorer performing moths, which speeds up convergence towards better solutions and keeps the search focused.
So these 3 things, faster convergence, jumping out of traps, and getting rid of bad solutions, they work together.
Exactly, they synergize. The combination significantly boosts the algorithm's performance, especially when you're dealing with really complex high-dimensional problems, the kind you often find in medical data.
And how is this one, BWMFO, being used in medicine?
Its main application so far is, again, optimizing the parameters for that Kelm machine learning model. This creates the BWMFO-Kelm model.
Another step up.
A significant step up, designed specifically for medical diagnosis and prediction. And the key finding is its superior performance.
Better than the others. Better than CMFO.
Consistently better. When tested on real-world medical datasets, BWMFO-Kelm achieved higher diagnostic accuracy and reliability compared to 5 other competing machine learning methods, including the previous chaos-enhanced one, CMFO-Kelm.
Can you give us some numbers? Where did it shine?
Sure. For instance, on a well-known breast cancer dataset from Wisconsin, it had an accuracy of 98.17%.
That's incredibly high for diagnostic accuracy.
It is. And it showed similarly strong performance on datasets for colorectal cancer and predicting malignancy from mammograms. It wasn't just about overall accuracy either.
What else?
It consistently outperformed the others, including the original MFO-Kelm and the CMFO-Kelm in metrics like sensitivity.
Sensitivity. That's catching the cases you need to catch, right? The true positives.
Exactly. In medical diagnosis, correctly identifying people who do have the disease is absolutely critical. You don't want false negatives.
Yeah.
And BWMFO-Kelm really excelled there.
That's a huge potential impact for patients. So let's just try and wrap this up. We started this deep dive looking at how chaos, the seemingly messy idea, is actually vital. It's a beneficial aspect of how our biology works.
Yeah, from the subtle variability in our heartbeats that signals adaptability, all the way up to the incredibly complex, dynamic computations happening in our brains. Healthy chaos.
And then we saw how those very concepts of variability, complex dynamics, adaptation are being deliberately harnessed, built into advanced algorithms.
Right, leading to breakthroughs like this BWMFO-Kelm model, which seems to be able to diagnose serious diseases more accurately by using machine learning that's fine-tuned with these chaos-inspired optimization techniques.
It's really a powerful story, seeing how principles from nature connect directly to cutting-edge tech and medicine.
It really is. It shows how much we can learn by looking at the complexity of life, not just trying to simplify everything.
It definitely makes you think, doesn't it? How understanding and maybe even designing with chaos, embracing it, rather than always fighting for pure, rigid order, how that could unlock even more powerful insights, more solutions.
In medicine, for sure, but maybe in technology, even social systems. Who knows?
Yeah. What other surprising patterns, what other beneficial complexities might be waiting out there, just waiting to be uncovered in the complex systems all around us, makes you wonder.
Okay, there's a human in the loop. If you have any questions, go for it. Use the chat. If there's no questions, we might move on to development.